Good. Evening, everybody. Well, it's lovely to come to a bonsai meeting and see so many happy faces. It's just fantastic. It's pretty rare to come to a club meeting and see so many people turn up. That's really good. And great to see some response to the call to bring some trees in, so thank you. So, who are those people who actually brought trees in? Could you put your hands up for me? Oh, thank you very much. Because Barry said when I come down here that I had to give chocolates to the people who brought trees in. Did he tell you that I had to give you chocolates?
No.
Oh, well, if he told you, he probably would have had more people bring trees in. So let's put those hands up again. Can you catch?
Thank you.
I don't. Oh, you're the president. You don't need a chocolate. Anybody else? Can you catch? Good. I've got two left. One, two. Has anybody missed out? You've missed out? Oh, they can't have anybody missing out.
I'll put you on there.
You didn't bring that juniper back, did you? You didn't bring that juniper back, did you? Okay. Oh, look, can I get this open? There we go. Anybody else missed out? Thanks for bringing the tree. Well, just pretend. She got one. Where did you get that? Oh! Okay. Now, look, I might ask a few questions during the night. Okay, so there's one. There's half a dozen left for somebody who actually responds. I like a responsive crowd. Okay. Now, you either answer my questions or you argue with me. Either way, it's good. So, look, thanks for having me down. I'm going to be talking to you about something tonight. I know you usually, when you have visiting tutors come in, you obviously you go out and usually buy a juniper and come back and they manipulate the juniper. Have you seen that being done before?
Yes, we have.
Is that really good?
It's okay.
Really good. So I couldn't face doing that again because I know we just do junipers and junipers and junipers. So I'm a bit of a broadleaf man. So that was why the request was to bring broadleafs along tonight. Because I don't think we do enough for broadleafs as broadleaf trees tomorrow.
I don't do enough to broadleafs.
Ah, well.
I neglect them.
That's good. So I wanted the opportunity to actually talk to you tonight and show you some pictures and talk about broadleaf trees. Because what I'm going to talk about tonight is really secret bonsai business. It's absolutely secret bonsai business because I can guarantee that you've never had anybody talk to you about it before. Really secret stuff. And it's really secret and important stuff because what is the shape of the tree that you're developing? What shape will it be?
It's gone off.
Gone off? Hello. I just need to put up high. So, you know, I mentioned I was going to tell you secrets in the microphone. So, it's secret bonsai business is this question about what shape is your bonsai going to be. Has anybody ever talked about that? So you probably have a lot of people telling you and assisting you and providing you advice about where to manipulate a particular branch, how to wire it and what position to put it in. But does anybody ever ask you, what shape is this tree going to be when you're finished with it? What is it going to look like? So, it's pretty important stuff, isn't it? And nobody's ever talked to you about it ever before. So, okay, it's going to be an interesting night then, isn't it? Don't get quiet on me, remove their chocolates. Okay, so choosing the shape of our trees, or as one famous bonsai person said, are we making our trees look like bonsai, or are we making our bonsai look like trees? Because we look into the natural environment and we see these beautiful trees, and we acknowledge them as being beautiful. We acknowledge their majesty. We acknowledge the tough, difficult life they've endured to achieve the shape they've got. And aren't they beautiful? But do we make bonsai like them? Not very often. What's that?
The native club does.
The native club does. And that's a very good question. And the native club does, but why don't we do the same thing with our exotic trees as well? Because we have, particularly in this state, in this town, we have lots of examples of exotic trees growing out there and they're beautiful trees as well. But do we make our bonsais look like them either? No, we don't. Well, we don't. We adopt a different model, don't we? So, to cut to the chase, my hypothesis is that many, many years ago, when bonsai was introduced to countries in the Western world like Australia, there were some folks who went to Japan, got enthusiastic about bonsai. They brought some guys out from Japan who were enthusiastic about bonsai. And of course, the guys in Japan, being enthusiastic about bonsai, grow black pines and junipers principally. And so these guys come out to Australia, the people in Australia who are interested in bonsai, get the folks to come out from Japan and explain how to design and how to style and how to manage and make a bonsai. But to the guys in Japan, a bonsai is a pine or a juniper. And so the pines and junipers had become the models for how to create a bonsai. But of course, pines and junipers are different from broadleaf trees. And so why should we adopt a model that's good for a conifer and apply that model to a broadleaf tree? Because when you get into it and understand what the Japanese do with their broadleaf trees, they style them differently from the conifers. But in the Western world, we had this model introduced about how to style bonsai, which was based on black pines and junipers. A few people around the place wrote some books about that. And once again, their books were based on the styling techniques and the styling models for conifers. And then those folks who wrote the book, then there were some people who came along and read the book. And the people who read the book trained some other people about how to style bonsai, and they trained them in this model which was associated with conifer trees. And the people who read the book trained the people, and those people who got they trained other people. And those other people, they went on to train members of bonsai clubs. So most of us who participated in bonsai clubs and learned our bonsai through bonsai clubs have adopted models that we've been trained to do by people who've been trained by people who've been trained by people who read a book about black pines. It's kind of weird, isn't it? I'll show you some pictures. So there's a beautiful native tree. It could be any conifer, so any broadleaf tree. And it's even more beautiful when you put it in a pot. And we'd all like to have it, wouldn't we? So let's start with trees. Trees are malleable things. They're like a piece of copper wire, they're like a piece of aluminium wire. You can bend them, you can shape them, you can make them do anything you want. A little bit of horticultural knowledge, you can do anything with them. So that means that if you want a particular shape in your tree, you can have it. Any shape you want, you can make it. If you can make one of these little houses out of the things, you can do anything with bonsai. So they can be whatever you want them to be. But the question comes back to this thing, what do you want them to be? Do we have an idea about what our trees will look like when they are styled and pitched? Or are we just shaping elements of our trees in a way which we're being told to do?
Excuse me, Steve, where is that tree, do you know?
No, I don't know. I think it's in Asia. You go through some of the airports in Asia and they do this with ficus where they plat them and they all just bond together and fuse together. They do some wonderful things.
Frank Williams too.
Could this be a bonsai, for example? or even the one behind over to the right? I mean, it's got structure. It's got a nice trunk line. It's got ramification. Is this a bonsai? Don't be afraid to speak up. Yes or no? No, it's not a bonsai, of course not. And why is it a bonsai? Because it's not in a pot, I know.
No, because it's having a pee.
Oh, it's what?
It's urinating.
Could this be a bonsai?
No.
I mean, there's been a lot of effort gone into pruning and shaping that.
Yeah, Tom has one of these.
What's that?
Yes. It's a vine.
What about if I put it in a pot? Would that make it a bonsai?
No.
I've seen bonsai that looks like that.
Oh dear.
I've seen bonsai that look like that. I call them ladder trees because people put them in the pot and they've got a branch out this side, then there's another one, and then there's another one, and then there's another one. And yes, they're two-dimensional. Yeah. So no, we're not. That's not a bonsai. Okay. What about these? Oh, no, they're elephants. That's right. They're topiary. So what's the difference between topiary and bonsai? Oh, there's a question. Now that deserves a chocolate. Who can answer me the difference between topiary and bonsai? There's a going. I think it's a hazelnut.
They're done on wire.
Hand up for Quentin. Yes,
They're
ma'am.
done on wire.
So what's that?
They're done on wire, aren't they?
They are done on wire.
Well,
That's part of the answer.
They're shaped to look like anything but a tree.
Yes.
Okay. So to paraphrase that answer, if you're interested in shaping a topiary, you're really only interested in the outer form, the profile. You don't care what goes on underneath that couple of millimetres of foliage, do you? It doesn't matter what happens with the structure. Whereas in bonsai, when our trees don't have leaves on, we're very interested in the structure. And we're very interested in the structure of our trees because we're trying to replicate what happens with trees in the natural environment. Because we look at and admire trees because of the structure of their componentry, because of their architecture. Topiary, who cares what the architecture's like? We're just worried about the canvas that goes over the top. So no, these aren't bonsai, even if we put them in pots. What about these? They've got more interesting shapes. They look a bit more like sort of tree things. Are they bonsai? Same thing. Ah, what about these?
Getting closer.
Are they bonsai or are they topiary? Have you ever seen bonsai that look like this?
Yes.
Yes, of course you have. So you put them in pots and maybe they're bonsai.
they're already involved.
Well, okay. Well, some people call them hamburger trees and some people call them cloud trees, don't they? In Asia, they're very popular. And in Japan, they call them Milwaukee. You can have chocolate. Yeah, no, that's right. So in Japan, they call them Milwaukee, and they're meant to be sort of whimsical garden trees. And the folks have got such small garden beds and small gardens that they put 6 of these in 2 square metres. And they can't let them grow like real trees, so they do this sort of pruning thing, and they call them Milwaukee. And they're pretty curious, and you walk around Japan and drive around Japan, you see these things everywhere, and it brings a smile to your face, and that's what they're meant to do. But do they replicate what we're trying to achieve in bonsai? No. What is it we're trying to do with bonsai, though? What's our goal with bonsai? What are we trying to achieve when we're shaping a bonsai?
Little trees.
Small tree, look like nature in a small.
We're trying to create a miniature tree, aren't we? We're trying to create a miniature tree. Have you ever seen a tree grow like that unaided? No. So it's not really a bonsai, is it? Is this a bonsai? Oh, dangerous question. Dangerous question. because in the Japanese lexicon, where they have very structural ideas, structured ideas, very fixed ideas about how you style particular species in the bonsai game. Some species they have a particular approach to where they do this sort of manicuring of branch pads to create that sort of appearance.
For the birds and the bees.
It's for the birds and the bees. Let's not talk about the birds. And is this getting closer? Yeah, and this is a very famous Walter Paul tree. Now, while we're on that, we talk about bonsai because we're interested in the structure, and I talked a bit about my hypothesis about why we shape trees the way we basically do, because they're built around a black pine model. And the black pine model is the formal black pine model with a big straight central trunk and branches that go off sideways. Principal feature of that model and that philosophy is a dominant single trunk. And so whenever you've been building a bonsai yourselves, the guidance you've had is about working towards a dominant single trunk, hasn't it? You'd never have anything more than a single trunk. Oh no, because that breaks all the rules. What does Walter Paul do? Can you see into the spaces? Is there one trunk in there? No. Oh my God, Walter Paul has made a big mistake.
For a couple of inches there is.
And what about this 90-year-old Japanese maple? It's a very famous tree. Very famous tree. It was most recently shown in a big exhibition in Japan just a couple of years ago. And you can find photographs on the net for many, many years before. And it has just grown incrementally over the years, only a small amount. But look at the ramification. Look at the branch structure. Look at the trunk structure. Can you see a dominant single trunk going all the way to the very top of the tree? No, you can't. Have you ever seen a tree like this in Australia? Apart from Quentin's garden? Any question I ask, and I've got nothing to do with anything that Quentin's done, okay?
Do you mean a bonsai tree or do you mean a garden tree?
A bonsai tree.
Okay.
We don't do bonsai like this, do we?
Uh,
I mean, this is a very beautiful maple tree. It might be a triton maple, but it's a very beautiful maple tree in the Western, the Western Universal model, isn't it? But it doesn't look like this tree, but this is how the Japanese do their bonsai trees. And our cultural foundation for the way in which we do bonsai has been Japan, hasn't it? Classical Japanese bonsai is the sort of thing we do, but we do classical Japanese bonsai for our pines and our junipers, but for our broadleaf trees, we totally ignore what the Japanese do in terms of what their approach might be to broadleaf trees, and we use our Western Universal model that's been handed down from the people who have been trained by the people who were trained by the people who read that book. Am I starting to make sense? So look at the structure of this tree. This is what we should be aiming to replicate in our bonsai. And there's some fundamental features about this, and we've got to be able to understand what is it that drives the Japanese, and why do they create trees like that. So, is our goal simply to create the impression of an aged tree in miniature? And I think that's what we're after, isn't it? The gentleman here said it very clearly. The difference between a bonsai and a topiary is we're trying to create the illusion of an aged tree in miniature. And it is an illusion. Look at the carved tree over here. Looks like it's 1,000 years old. The carving on it does make it look like that, but it's certainly not that way. So there's been work being done on this thing to give it that illusion. This beautiful carved, hollowed out old thing here looks ages and ages older than it probably is because of the carving that's been done on it, and necessarily also the shaping of the branches. So it's an illusory thing we're engaged in. We're using young material to make it look old. We know the difference between young and old. You know, young is straight and upright. Old is twisted and bent and curved. So we see things and intuitively know straight away what the difference is. So we're engaged in creating an impression. Well, that depends on which aesthetic you're following. An aesthetic is this idea of what we hold as being beautiful. And you need to make that deliberate choice. So one of the things I'd like to leave you with a message tonight, if you leave with nothing other than that, is that it's up to each of us when we are choosing to refine and shape and style our trees, but what we're doing is we're doing this because that's our choice of what we want to do, because we have an idea about the end result we want to produce. It's not about we're doing it because I've been told that's what I've got to do. I'm doing it because I want to do it this way because I know the result that I want to achieve, and I want my bonsai to look like a tree. That's the right answer. You've got to work out how you fill the gaps in to achieve that. And I say, be careful about operating by default, because I think the Western Universal model, the one that comes from the guy who was trained by the guy who was trained by the guy who read the book, which was based on the black pine ideology, is just training by default, because that is the default answer for what you're doing when you're styling bonsai. So, if you feel that you're being in a position where your styling process is just this default option, then stand back and just think for a minute and say, okay, well, I am just styling by default because that's what I've told a bonsai should look like. So am I making my bonsai look like a tree, or am I making my tree just look like this typical bonsai? So it's then, if I want my bonsai to look like a tree, the difficult question is, what does a tree look like? And so many of us are so busily engaged in shaping our bonsai to this Western Universal model that we don't stand back and look at the trees around us and say, what shape is that tree? And can I replicate that in the structure that I'm building in my bonsai? Because that's what we should be doing. So in the West, our aesthetic foundations have come from Japan. I said they're our cultural foundation in terms of how we style our trees. And we should refresh ourselves about the shape of the trees that they produce, the shape of their broadleaf trees. Because tonight we're talking about broadleaf trees. I've got no argument with conifers, I've got no argument with what we do with black pines. I've got no argument with what we do with our broadleaf trees. So these are some of those trees. And rarely do we see trees like this in Australia.
At our bonsai
Except in
show.
Clinton's garden.
At our bonsai show.
Sorry?
At our winter bonsai show.
There were a number of them. I admit. I gladly admit, and I owe my respect to this club for the work that they do.
I don't want a chocolate.
There's some very... You've already had one.
I'm just
because there are some
thinking
very high
about
quality
these.
trees I know that come from the club. But But if you go to Japan, you'll see a lot of trees like this, and very few trees of the sort of model of that Western Universal model. So this is the characteristic. This is what we see in Japan. So the sorts of things we see in Japan when we look at these is we see trees that have a fair representation. It's an idealised representation of the natural habitat of these trees. It's idealised, I give you that, absolutely. They're prettier than they would be in the natural world. They're more perfect than they would be in the natural world, but that's the Japanese approach to everything they do. Apart from that, structurally, there are some elements of the structure which are really important to note that they have in common. One of them is a thing I call fan-branched architecture, and it is an indicator of an age. Remember the old fans that your grandmothers used to have and they used to wave? Okay, they're made out of some sort of woven material, and they had some blades in them. And so some were down. As you come around the fan, they come around, they come up, and they come up, and they come up, and the top of the fan, they're vertical. So if you look in these trees, you see that fan-branched architecture. The lower branches are down, and up they come, and the top of the tree is made up of a whole series of branches that principally go from 45 degrees to vertical. And every tree, they follow a similar sort of model. And it's how you build an apex in a deciduous tree, or it's how you build an apex in a broadleaf tree. And this is what the Japanese approach to it is. The other critical element about that is, in terms of what the Japanese do, is their approach to branch density, the number of branches. Look at the number of branches on these trees. Look at the number of branches on them. There are lots and lots and lots and lots, aren't there? And because there are lots and lots and lots of branches, each branch doesn't carry very many leaves. And leaves are the things that produce and manufacture timber. And so if you don't have very many leaves, you don't build very heavy branches. And if you don't build very heavy branches, your branches remain much thinner than the trunks of the trees, which is a much more naturalistic look. And of course, what we try and do when we're building trees is because we try and build a little too quickly. We try and build it a little too quickly, and so we take a stock tree at a certain height, and we try and keep it at that height, and try and develop it into bonsai. It might only have 6 branches. So we bend those branches into some sort of position, we try and stop the tree from growing, we tip-root it, we keep it there, and here's a bonsai with 6 branches. 6 branches? How many branches do these trees have? The problem when you've only got 6 branches is that they end up with a lot of leaf mass. Each branch has a lot of leaf mass, all those leaves build timber. You end up with branches the same diameter as the trunk of the tree. And so your illusion of creation and impression of an aged tree in miniature is just shot straight away. Your branches have to be smaller than the trunk of the tree. You can't do that if you've only got 6 branches. How do you solve that problem? Well, one of the things you can do is you can put a number of trunks together, so that even though each of them have only got 6, you've got something that's you've got 3 branches, 3 trunk lines go up, and each of them got 6, suddenly there are 18 branches, and each of those branches takes its place. So if you've got a tree that's only got 6 branches, your alternatives are find 2 others just like it and put them together. Then you've got 18 branches, or wait till it's 3 times higher and do the same thing again, and then you'll have another 18 branches, and then you can do something with it. But you don't want it that high, do you? You only want a small tree. So the trick is, how do you get more branches on it? You've got to do what the Japanese do. You've got to build your tree from the ground up. Cut and grow, cut and grow, cut and grow, cut and grow, cut and grow over a long period of time, and incrementally build it and build a number of branches. Branch density is critical. Fan-branched architecture is critical. And you've got to build those into your broadleaf trees. But this is the thing that you will predominantly see when you go to look at broadleaf trees in Japan. And this is what we have to do with our broadleaf trees in Australia if we subscribe to the idea that the Japanese aesthetic is our cultural foundation for how we try to build our trees.
Sorry, Stephen. How does cut and grow, cut and grow, cut and grow give you more branches?
Because every time you cut it,
You're cutting the trunk?
every time you cut it, yes, you cut the trunk, and you build your tree through bifurcation, which is a division into 2. So if you cut it, have a division into 2, one becomes a branch, one becomes a trunk line. Let it grow, cut it again, branch trunk line, 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 branch trunk line. And you'll get all the branches. This is just a beautiful thing, isn't it? But it's a beautiful thing In our Western traditions, with our Western universal model that we've used, and I think you will understand why I mean by that Western universal model, because it happens not in Australia, but throughout the Western world. In our Western universal model, we aim for flat branches. Flat branches where the primary branch is out, mostly horizontal, secondary branches come out, also horizontal, tertiary branches out horizontal, but then what happens is it sort of kind of gets out of control, which by the time you get to very fine branches, there are too many to wire, so they go vertical. So oftentimes you'll see that model degenerate into sort of brushes for branches, with all the little brushes pointing up at the end of a long branch. But Japanese build compound branches because they're multi-dimensional. They're deep, they're wide, and they're high. They have elements that come out, they have elements that come below. Now, we're told, one of the rules of bonsai when you're developing bonsai, anything that goes up, cut it off, anything that goes down, cut it off. Have you ever said that in this club? I hope not. Of course. Because that's one of the rules if you're doing a black pine bonsai, and if you've been trained by the guy who read the book. Because that's what you do with those trees. But the Japanese don't do that with the broadleaf trees. They have elements within the one branch where one part goes down and one part's up. Another one sideways, another one over here. And they build compound branches. So remember compound branches rather than simple branches, and simple branches are two-dimensional. You can go through a tree with a piece of paper and put those pieces of paper on all the branches. Have you ever seen a real tree with branches like that? No. Because in the real world, they're compound. Okay, so fan-branched architecture. Lower branches down, intermediate branches with the tips pointing up. Up. Branches partway down the tree contributing to this bigger, broad, rounded canopy. This is the structure of real trees, this is the structure of broadleaf bonsai in Japan. And just for comparison, I'll show you some Australian trees. So the trees at the top of the page, QBS is Queensland Bonsai Society, BCI Gold Coast, BCI Gold Coast, BCI Gold Coast. So the annual convention of bonsai in Australia was held in the Gold Coast a couple of years ago. These trees are photographed there. Now I mentioned before ladder trees. Can you see the ladder trees? Can you see the Japanese trees? Is anybody having trouble identifying the difference between the Australian trees and the Japanese trees at the moment? What? Right? They're probably much older. But if you look at the trees on the top, do you see that they are on a journey to end up like the ones down below? No way. No way. No. And in these models you can see here, you can see the beginning of some problems horticulturally with adopting this Western universal model. One of them is that, remember the fan-branched architecture, building with the apex in a typical Japanese model doesn't happen with this style. And so what happens is the apex gets to a certain point, the owner then says, I don't want that tree to be taller. And they incessantly tip prune it and tip prune it and tip prune it. And so the top of that little tree grows and develops, and it's got this little bobblehead. So you see a gap where, yeah, sure, the birds can fly through, but beyond that is this little hamlet on top. And you can just see it going. And so a lot of Australian trees, you see these little bobbleheads, and they pass as a very poor imitation of how to build an apex structure in a broadleaf tree. Trident maple. Ficus. And look at the bobblehead here where it's got out of control. And because you get pruning here, the top of the tree tends to be a broom with horizontal as well as vertical structures. And because there's so much happening there, so biologically active, so much sunlight right at the top, you end up with a little fist at the top of the trunk line. It blows out the proportion, and straight away your illusion of creation of an age tree miniature is just shot. This was the AABC conference in Brisbane in 2017. I don't know if many of you were there at that conference at the time, but I was the crazy guy who did the pot with the really funny kiln. Remember that? Yeah. The microwave plasma kiln.
We liked it.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? I really liked selling it for $2,000 because I had some good offers at that day. So, can you see any replications of the Japanese model here? We can't, can we? What do we see? We see more ladder trees because this is the Western universal model. And you can begin to see the fallacy of that model against the Japanese model, which is where our cultural foundation is supposed to come from. And not only do we universally apply this model without thinking about it, because it is the default option. Remember the default option? It is the default option. We've sort of kind of lost in that application of that default model, we've lost the view about the integrity that the trees that we're working on are due to reflect the natural habit of their behaviour, or the natural growth habit that they just demonstrate. So, I mean, ficus, for example, I'm more familiar with them than probably you guys are. I don't know whether you get to see ficus out in the real world. You probably do. But a big ficus tree out in an open space, the lower branches come out and they go down, they do a sinusoidal, nearly touch the ground, and up they go again. There's multiple trunk elements come out of it, don't they? They come out, multiple trunks come up, and they form a long, low, arched apex, and they're magnificent things. They're just amazing structures. There are two ficus here. There's this one here. I can see a black pine here. I can see a formal black pine without any doubt whatsoever. And this is a ficus as well. We talk about trunk taper. I mean, it's a crazy tree. Fortunately, the owner of this is in Queensland. He's not down here in Melbourne. But I can say what I like. I can speak to some freedom. You can see the little bobblehead on the top. It's these horizontal lines through there because the horizontal branches are. It's not a good replication of a ficus, is it? And yet we do it over and over and over again because of the guy who wrote the book and taught the people who taught the people that this is what a bonsai should look like. This is what a bonsai should look like. So we're making our trees to look like what a bonsai should look like. We're not making our bonsai to look like trees. Styling by default. That's what I should be doing. I should be making it like a formal black pine. That's the model. That's where this model has come from. This guy's in Germany, fortunately. He's in America. He's very proud of this tree. He's been thinking about formal black pines as well. Either of us thinking about formal black pines or else in America, they also teach this Western Universal Standard, and I think that might be the answer actually. So we end up with these little topiarised branch pad things that look like brushes or hamburgers on the end of very few branches on a tall tree. Have you ever seen a tree that looks like that? No. Okay, another interesting observation. So here's a couple of beautiful Japanese trees, a juniper and a pine, undeniably magnificent, beautiful. Some sort of representation of what they would be like in the real world, but some sort of representation. Anybody know what the things on the left-hand side of the page are? Club logos. Good man, you deserve another chocolate. You've had too many already. Yes, club logos. Club logos. So this tells us what bonsai clubs think bonsai should look like. Now I know you guys don't have a black pine as a logo for your club. Believe me, I looked. Believe me, I looked because I knew I had to be careful what I said tonight. And the other thing I've taken in great care, you'll be very pleased to know, is all of these logos come from American bonsai clubs, you see, so I've really been careful tonight. I know how much cross-membership there is here in Victoria, so I'm being careful. But look, Australia is just the same. You go online and do a search for bonsai clubs in all sorts of different sorts of places, and up comes their logo, and they are these really weird-looking, crazy, black pine-inspired caricatures of bonsai. Because even the Japanese don't do this with their black pines. So this demonstrates to you, really, beyond any doubt at all, just how invasive and how influential that Western universal model for building bonsai has become, because it's been built into our logos. This is what we think a bonsai should look like. And every club around the country, every club around the Western world, their logos are of conifers. Conifers. Yes.
Not the native club.
Not the native club. Believe me, I know, I looked there as well. Okay, but you would think, around the world there might be 50% of clubs had broadleaf trees as their logo. Conifers. Are you buying into my hypothesis?
Yep.
Pretty clear, isn't it? We only have to look for the evidence. So, I was confronted with the idea of trying to retain members in my bonsai club at the Redlands Bonsai Society in Brisbane. And we had the usual drift in and drift out and drift in and drift out. We did the usual things of workshop days and all those sorts of things, but people weren't sort of getting what they needed, so I decided I needed to run a course. So I started and developed a course which I called Bonsai Foundations. And I'm now just finished my 4th year of running Bonsai Foundation. It's 8 sessions of 3 hours, where we do the whole theory of everything that you could ever understand about bonsai that you needed to do. There are 2 major chapters that I talk in there. One of them is about what style is it, which covers some of the stuff we're talking about today, and the other one is about bonsai aesthetics, which covers the sort of stuff we're talking about tonight. And after a couple of years, and I forced my students to take notes because it was an active learning process, the pressure became too great, and so I committed it all to a book. It's now Bonsai Foundation, so this is the official plug. There it is, Bonsai Foundations. $30, there's only 4 left. If I sell those and people want some more, I'm happy to take orders. But it was an important process, and going through the process of writing that book to define the sort of stuff that I was teaching meant that I had to confront this question of styling, because when you're going to teach, you have to explain. And teaching is a wonderful way to learn something. Because when you're going to teach them, and your teachers in the room, when you're going to teach them, you've got to be really sure about what you're saying. You've got to be able to back it up. You've got to know what you're saying, you've got to know why you're saying it, and you've got to be able to answer questions about it. So you've got to be sure. So I did my research. I came up with my hypothesis, and I did some drawings. Okay? So the drawings show you Western Universal Style. You'll all recognise this now after discussion tonight. If you put needles on it, what does it become? A black pine. Yeah. Okay? These are the trees that we saw from the Japanese world. And that's why I call it Eastern broadleaf styles. Because Eastern being Eastern Asian, broadleaf styles. So the things they do with their broadleafs, yes, sometimes they do have a dominant single trunk. And they take it very close to the top of the tree. But at the same time, the branches are not horizontal. And the branches in proximity to the top of the tree come off at a high angle to form the apex of the tree. So that the photosynthetic load at the very top of the tree is shared by branches further down the tree. So that you don't get a bobblehead form. And it represents the real thing that's happening in the top of a broadleaf tree. The older branches are downward, so you can see the fan-branched architecture, you can see the branch density. The other thing that broadleaf trees do, and you will see it in the Japanese trees, is a natural aspect where as a tree reaches its mature height, it loses its level of vigour as it's reaching its pumping capability. And the apex of the tree will get eaten, broken, destroyed, damaged, and it will divide. And it doesn't have the energy any longer to give dominance to one or another, and the trunk line will divide. And this is what happens. Somewhere near the 2/3 of the way up the tree, more often than not, a broadleaf tree will divide its apex, its trunk line, and there will be multiple trunk lines that go up. And from that 1/3 from the top of the tree all the way down to 1/3 from the bottom of the tree, like on the right-hand illustration, you will get the same thing happening. Look at Walter Paul's tree. The trunk divided right near the base of the tree. You look at a lot of Japanese trees, you will see, look at that 90-year-old Chinese maple. The trunk was divided and twisted and turned. That model. The model on the right can be used for all sorts of deciduous trees, but it's also the exact model that you'd use for ficus, because that's how ficus grow. Now, if you distorted that image and made it wider than it is high, straight away it's a classic ficus view. So the Eastern broadleaf styles is just in my humble opinion, are the models that we should be adopting for our broadleaf trees. And we should be reserving the Western Universal style for our pines and junipers, because that's where it is based in. So our goal is to simulate an aged tree in miniature. So I decided that I needed to be able to define the Japanese aesthetic. And so I've come up with a description of the Japanese aesthetic as having 4 planks, 4 principal ideas. One of them is authenticity. you go to Japan and look at their handicrafts, whether it's their metal work or their woodwork or their fabric or their timber work or the ceramics, or it's all just absolutely gorgeous, and it's authentic, and it's handmade. It's got historical basis, it's traditional. So authenticity is very important to Japanese, very important to them. Bonsai is just another handcraft for the folks in Japan, and I cannot imagine that authenticity wouldn't play an important part in the aesthetic that they're trying to bring to the appearance of their trees. Authenticity to me is an important part of the way in which we would describe the aesthetic to apply to developing our trees. And authenticity to me is paying some sort of homage and respect to the natural growth habit of the tree that we're working on. We want our bonsai to look like a tree that looks like the real tree. It wants to be authentic. We want to make an authentic representation of an aged tree in miniature. Age in the spirit of nature. I mean, we all know that the Japanese revere and respect greatly age. They like their old folks. They look after their old folks. They have this philosophy of wabi-sabi, where things can be old and battered and had a tough life, but they respect them more because of the scratches and dents they've got, rather than chuck them away and let's get the nice new veneered model in that's nice and smooth. So they like this age. They have this respect for nature. Nature's so important to them. Every tree, every rock, every stream, every mountain's got a God involved in it. So they revere nature. So we have to build that reverence for nature, that respect for nature, and that appearance of age into our bonsai to achieve the Japanese aesthetic. So this is a very important thing. This is a very important thing. And these things don't stand alone, because that spirit of nature ties in with that question of authenticity and what's the natural habit of the trees. They're wrapped up together in many ways. Harmony and proportion, we've talked about fan-branched architecture. We talked about the relative scale of the weight of the different branches throughout the tree. It's these sorts of things. It's having a tree in depth. Many trees we have in our Western world are two-dimensional. The ladder trees, just branches left and right. Or totally truncated in the front, fully exposed, the coat's open, something going on behind here, but nothing in the front. Okay? Japanese trees aren't like that. All the branches come all the way to the front. So it's 360. So, full dimensions, depth, proportion, all of those things, and many of the things otherwise that we would normally come to discuss, like the things like Nabara, like the taper and the trunks and so on. Balance and posture. So, I'll come to that one again in a moment. So let's just look at this again. So, authenticity. So here's a ficus on the left. The larger picture is a ficus bonsai. It's had its leaf pulled off so we can see the structure. It looks pretty much like the sort of thing. It's an improved version. It's a highly glossed up, really first-class model of what a ficus might look like in the real world. Down the bottom is that illustration we talked about before. It's stretched so it's a bit wider than this high. And then over the right we have that model from the convention in Brisbane of a ficus. This is what authenticity is. So the big picture has the authenticity for a fig bonsai that the little picture on the right doesn't have. That's what authenticity is about. Age and the spirit of nature. Well, we know what that is. We see it instantly and we recognise it. Now, we might be developing our bonsai from relatively young material in Australia, even some of our oldest material is still relatively young by Japanese standards. But if you look around here and look at some of the bark structure, look at some of the rumbles and bubbles on the trunks of things, we can begin to see the aspects that we want to incorporate in a bonsai that reflect age. So what is the age aesthetic? It's all about those rumples and bumples. It's about movement, it's about curvature, it's about things that are dead, it's about gaps where things have broken and died off. It's about asymmetry because they've been in certain conditions for such a long period of time. All of these things add to this contribution and impression of age and is part of this aesthetic. Really, really important when it comes to our bonsai. Harmony and proportion. So here's another beech, same sort of thing that we've talked about before. Fan branching, fine branching, many branching. Canopy formed by upward and outward growing elements. Looking like a real tree. No doubt, a much improved real tree, but much like a real tree. Balance and posture. These two pine trees, and I've used a pine tree tonight because it's the best illustration I could find. One of them is a real tree, and one of them is the photoshopped real tree. So the tree at the bottom, there are three elements which build to this issue of consistent balance and posture. One of them is the direction of the trunk. So the direction of the trunk is certainly saying off to the left somewhere, isn't it? It's leaning off to the left. The dominant branch, the biggest branch, the heaviest branch, happens to be the lowest one. It might not always be the lowest one, but here's the biggest branch. It's going with that trunk line. The top of the tree, the shape of the top of the tree imitates a rolling wave. When you see a rolling wave, steeper on the front, more shallow on the back, we know it's heading to the shore because of that shape. And it tells you a direction. And this wave tells you a direction to the left. So we've got three major elements: the trunk, the apex, and the major branch, all pointing in the same direction. And because they're all consistent, all going in the same direction, they give us a feeling of visual comfort. We look at that and think, yeah, that's right, that's good. I feel comfortable with that. It looks natural. I can see the natural forces that would prevail on all of the tree to give it that shape. Now the tree on the top, of course. The creator of this tree has got trunk, dominant branch, and then the apex going the other way. A little confused, a little edgy, a little conflicted, driven by one of the rules of bonsai that we will have been exposed to when we were younger, is that the apex must be over the trunk of the tree. Because that's one of the rules. You just have to do that. And to hell with the consequences. And the tree on the bottom, of course, it's a classic planting style. The apex isn't over the base of the tree. Now you just have to work out which of those two models gives you greater visual comfort, because that's the sort of model that you've got to adopt in building a bonsai. Has anybody worked out which is the real tree?
Bottom one.
The bottom one? No. Top one. No one gets a chocolate. The top one's the real tree, and the bottom is the modified tree. So I saw the top tree and I thought, no, it's wrong. Just need to turn the top around. So I put it on Photoshop and turned the top around. Only life was as easy as that. But it does show you how the application of the rules of bonsai can be applied in a way to create something that isn't nearly as beautiful as a different approach. And it's just another warning to be careful of applying those rules, of be careful of the default option.
If a tree in nature starts to lean one way, it will start to orient itself. So that's what you get when you talk about it. It's balancing itself.
That is a myth.
I used to collect my life.
Okay, well, I bow to your experience. I'm not sure, I've seen some that keep on going as well.
Oh yes.
Yeah. I think there's an element of our viewing of trees in the natural world to form a view that they behave like people. And I think there's a view that if a tree has a lean on it, it will want to counteract that lean to restore balance. But a tree doesn't work on balance. A tree can be unbalanced all its life and lean in a certain direction, and the roots on the tree will hold it in that position all its life. It doesn't have the need that we have to be balanced over our feet. Balance and posture. So that is my view of what the Japanese design aesthetic is. If you're going to follow the Japanese principles of bonsai design, just think authenticity, age, harmony, and balance. They're the only four things you need to remember, and build those into your bonsai. Now, the other thing that I do with those is when I'm evaluating trees, I use those as the criteria for evaluation. If I'm judging trees, I use those as the criteria for judging trees. Because if they're important in the aesthetic, they're important in our evaluation of the trees. He didn't want to miss the evening, obviously. So, but of course, that's the Japanese aesthetic. Now, there are lots of places that don't apply the Japanese aesthetic. And if we apply a different set of principles, if we redefine that aesthetic in a different way, we create different trees. And throughout Asia, there is a bonsai practice. There are bonsai practices, and they create trees which are different from the Japanese trees. So has anybody been to Vietnam? Yeah, it's not working. I'll have to speak up. Has anybody been to Vietnam? Yes. And so if you go to Vietnam, these are the sorts of trees you'll see. So they have a different view about what it is they're trying to create. What does that mean? It simply means that if you're going to create bonsai, you have to choose your aesthetic. It's not automatic, it's not by default. You make a choice. If you like Vietnamese style bonsai, great, go for it. you've got the model. Be happy and make that choice consciously. If you like Japanese style bonsai, find out what Japanese bonsai look like and make your trees look like that. Or if you like Malaysian bonsai, fantastic things, but they love this idea of having very broad, expansive, extending trees, but wonderful ramification. Or if you like Indonesian bonsai. Or if you like Chinese bonsai. And we all like a good fantasy tree, don't we? They're curious things. It's not Japanese, are they? Because they're driven by the beat of a different drum. Their aesthetic for what their penjing should look like is obviously different. Think about Chinese theatre with red lanterns and jumping lions and drums. I mean, dragons, very theatrical, very noisy, very entertaining. Not much reflection of the real world nature of trees. But if you really admire penjing and you like the way they look, and a lot of people do turn some of their bonsai into this, what I call fantasy bonsai, that's great. If it spins your wheels and it presses your buttons, well, just go for it, but make your choice consciously. Okay, so bonsai is another art form, isn't it? And we've just been looking at the aesthetic in different parts of Asia and seeing that there are bonsai that are shaped differently, depending on how you define your aesthetic. Now, if you come to being an artist and you're painting pictures, let's say you're a landscape painter. There are classifications for the way in which you might paint your painting. It might be abstract on the left-hand side, or it might be figurative. Figurative meaning much more realistic. And it's a spectrum. Somewhere in between, you can choose where you might like to paint your picture. Okay? Bonsai is no different. There's a spectrum of aesthetics, there's a spectrum of design principles, there's a spectrum of styling methods. And it may be from the abstract, and I'm just using penjing here as an abstract means of identification of something you can do with trees, through to something that's much more figurative, and we come back to waterfall's tree, this time with a few autumn leaves. So it really is a matter of making a choice where you sit between that abstract to the figurative approach to the aesthetic. And if you went back and looked at all of those different models throughout Asia for bonsai, let alone globally, you might be able to identify these different countries and put them somewhere on that spectrum. So we can see the penjing over here on the left. The Vietnamese we looked at are much more abstract. So then the Malaysian, the Taiwanese, the Japanese bonsai, they're not ultra realistic, but they're really very strongly inspired by the realistic. So we get to the realistic end of the scale. The Europeans and the North Americans are probably a little bit more to the right than the Japanese. And then you get a few folks in Australia who are out there on the bleeding edge of reality and creating bonsai that look really crazily wild, real life things, but they've gone beyond the point of being beautiful probably. But you, as developers of bonsai, can choose where you want to be. And you get to make a choice and say, oh, I like that spot. These trees that I've seen that come from this cultural background with that aesthetic definition look really good, and I like those trees. I'm going to make mine just like that. To hell with everybody else, because I like them. Terrific. Now, well, that creates a problem, because what does the club think? You guys as a club need to have a work out and say, well, what do we think as a club? Where would we as a club want to be? Do we want to be wide spectrum, or do we want to be narrow spectrum? Because imagine the Archibald competition. The Archibald competition for portraits. The Win competition, a few days later, for landscape. Imagine if somebody said, oh, okay, it's a bit difficult, 2 exhibitions, all that prizes. I think we'll put them together. 1 exhibition, 1 prize. So we're going to put all the landscape paintings in with the portraits, and Joe Blogg's over here, he gets to be the judge. Pick out the best painting, please. How do I do that? How can I pick the best painting? They're all so different. I mean, you've got portraits, you've got landscape. Well, how can I pick the best painting? It's just, you're asking too much. I can't do it. And they say, well, look, actually, I really like portraits. Because I really like portraits, I'm going to give the best prize to a portrait painter. Bugger those landscape. They're crazy people with landscape. I don't like those at all. I really like portraits, so you get the portrait landscape. So if you've got a club, and your club, very wide spectrum of interest in bonsai styling, you say, no, everything's good for us because we're an inclusive club, everybody can come, everybody comes on board, that's fantastic. You have your show, everybody brings their trees on, so we've got the left-hand spectrum over here, we've got the middle guys, we've got the right-hand side. Who's going to judge that? Against what criteria? Who's going to win the prize?
Well, there doesn't,
You're going to judge.
there doesn't have to be a prize or a judge or a...
But do you award prizes?
Well, my club doesn't.
You don't?
No, we don't.
A lot of clubs do. A lot of clubs do. And yeah, there's arguments for or against. But if that were the case, and there were prizes awarded, I mean, you'll get a judge in, and the judge will award a prize based on his own personal preferences, style. So you'll get the influence of the judge's aesthetic, not the club's aesthetic. And some people might feel, well, because the judge, we know he just likes such and such a sort of trees, I'm not even going to put my tree in the show because I'm wasting my time because I'm down the left end of the scale, he just doesn't like what I do.
They may not let you put yours in the show.
What's that?
They may not let you put yours in the show.
Well, right. I might get to the door and they'll say, put it back in the car. We're not having that in here.
The first club I...
You only do people's choice. Okay, the ultimate judge. Well, and I think that's what we can do. And if you're a broad spectrum club, well, I think that's really what you've got no option. You can't be prized, otherwise half the club's going to be unhappy. But it's an interesting idea, isn't it? It's an interesting idea. Nobody ever talked to you about shape before. This is it.
The first club I joined, sometimes when I brought something along, and I didn't know anything, and I was, you know, and I'd bring along something tentatively, and there was one person there who would say, "We don't do that."
We don't do that in our club. Yeah.
She didn't. No, it was not this club. This is the second club I joined.
Yeah. And that's probably without the club deciding what actually we do.
It was her opinion.
Yeah.
Totally and utterly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the sort of natural consequence of bonsai existing within a broad spectrum. And it really does. We have to acknowledge it does. You know, I'd hate to come along here and tell you tonight what's right and what's wrong. I'd hate to do it, but I'll do it for you anyway because I really feel I should.
Stephen, I'm interested how you got North American right towards the figure. Is there a reason you put them there?
Look, I think if you look at a lot of the trees that come out of North America, I think they're over there on that much more reflective of nature, the natural approach to trees than the stylistic model.
Even though probably more influenced by Japanese bonsai than that.
I think they've gone beyond that Japanese influence in both Europe and North America. I think they've put it aside from them. They've moved on. I mean, apart from people like Ryan Neal, for example. He admires Japan, Japanese bonsai. He's been there, and all the things he's done, all that sort of stuff. He's modified his style and approach. He's Americanised, he's westernised a little bit beyond that. Apart from the fact you might be able to take the boy out of Japan, it's hard to take the Japan out of the boy because you still see it there a bit. But I think he's moved on. But there are lots of other professionals in the world, the bonsai world in America, and I think younger people are taking a different view, trying to do something different, trying to branch out a little bit. But entirely arbitrary that placement, and happy to move the dots along wherever you like. So here's two approaches to beach, Japanese beach. The one on the tree is, the one on the left is classical Japanese style approach to a beach bonsai. And it's the sort of thing you will see, if you see 1,000 of them in Japan, it looks like they've all come out of the one mould because despite the fact that people say they aren't, I think they're very cookie cutter. This tree has to be like this, azalea, this is how you do an azalea. October, this is how you do a October, and if you don't do it that way, well, you're drummed out of society. The tree on the right, same species, Walter Paul, no doubt it's a collected material rather than something he grew from a seedling, and because of that he's lived with some of the constraints of a piece of collected material, but the tree on the right has much more lifelike, real-world appearances of a beech tree than the one on the left. And so, subtle distinction, but nonetheless a distinction. And this is the sort of choice that you as bonsai developers get to make in terms of shaping the tree. Well, the one on the left or the one on the right? The one on the right. Yeah, well, it has, that's right. Yeah, you can see the impact of nature more, whereas this is the perfected model. This is the highly coiffed, highly developed model. This is what they do in Japan. So it's this subtlety of choice that you get to make. So, the moral of the story so far, I haven't finished, so you can't go yet. There's no central authority with bonsai. So bonsai can be whatever you want it to be. So you get to make your choice. Nobody gets to make the choice for you. So you get a guy like me come along and say, no, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. You need to be doing this. No, just ignore me. You do what you want to do. Yeah, it does. But please make that choice. Don't just act on default or by default because somebody told you to do it. Work out what you want. Work out which aesthetic you want to choose. Choose your aesthetic. And then say, my aesthetic is this, can you please help me achieve that result? Don't just say, I've got this tree, I don't know what to do with it. Because then you're just going to get the aesthetic of the guy that you asked to get some help from. You follow someone else's instruction, you'll just get their aesthetic. But how should we treat different types of trees? Is one approach good for all? So this is where we come across this question of juniper and black pine, conifers versus broadleaf trees. Has anybody seen this picture before? I think we've all seen it.
Yes.
You go searching for bonsai style and this thing comes up all the time. The one tree that's different in the middle is the broom, which is the Zelkova, because this is how you style a Zelkova. And it's just so funny, if you go looking at pictures of Zelkovas as mature trees, they tend to grow this way anyway. So it's a fair reflection of their natural habit, which is interesting and perhaps not surprising. All the other trees, what are they? They're black pines. Because black pines are grown in all these different styles. But you never see a diagram like this for broadleaf trees. And so people who haven't considered drawing the distinction between creating bonsai and using that model for all species would adopt this as a model of how to build their bonsai. Whereas you need to look at this and say, this is a bonsai styling guide for conifers. Not a bonsai styling guide for broadleaf trees. Because if we adopt this model for all trees, including broadleaf trees, we end up with the Western Universal Standard, because there's the formal upright model, there's the informal model. Does it have to fit here to be bonsai? Well, of course it doesn't, because conifers have this classic triangular shape, and we're told all our bonsai could end up with a triangular shape, couldn't they? They should have an apex, and they should be alongside this side, and this is the fundamental aim of all bonsais to have this triangular model. Well, the triangular model comes from conifers, so again, it's another conifer idea that's been adapted to all bonsai, not just conifer bonsai. So conifers have this triangular shape with a dominant single trunk that goes all the way to the top tree. Fine, use that as a model for your conifers. But a broadleaf tree has a broad rounded canopy and multiple branches that go upwards, or multiple trunk lines that go up to form the canopy. This just happened to be a juxtaposition of a couple of trees grown down in the foreshore near where I live. A Norfolk Island pine and a ficus. And somewhere else, here's two pictures of trees. One of them is a calyptrus, Australian conifer, dominant single trunk, triangular shape, all the way to the top of the tree, and a eucalypt with rangy old, low dome structure and multiple vertical elements in the tree going up to form the canopy. Broadleaf and conifer trees are different creatures. They're totally different creatures, and we should apply different methodologies, different models to the styling of these different trees in bonsai. Fundamental question, I've got this tree in front of me, what do I do with it? Well, what is it? Is it a conifer or is it a broadleaf tree? Tell me what it is. I can give you some guidance about how you should be styling it if you're interested in being towards the right end of the spectrum and dealing with this tree. Just a little illustration I've tried to put together to try and show you the similar sort of trunk line, what some of those differences might be. So the conifer has that classically narrow, two-dimensional branch structure that comes down to form these pads. And we've heard about pads all the time. People talk about pads with bonsai. Really, it's bonsai pads that come with junipers and pines. And the laid down branches tend to go closer to the apex than they would with a broadleaf tree. Whereas a broadleaf tree, we have compound branch structure which has got 3 dimensions and has depth, because some elements go down and some go up. As we move up the tree, we have this fan branched architecture, and the top of the tree is divided by a number of elements that come from lower down in the tree. So if you buy into creating the illusion of aged trees and miniatures as a goal, and this question of authenticity, which is being honest to the natural habit of the tree in which we're styling, then build something faithful to the type of tree. Is it a conifer or is it a broadleaf? And to that species. So find out, is this tree a conifer and a broadleaf? And that's fairly self-evident. But with the broadleaf species that you're growing, what does it look like in the real world? Because some broadleaf tree species have different characteristics from others. Some are very upwardly inclined and they just want to grow upwards. And you can fight with those trees for ever and a day to try and get their branches down flat, and they'll argue with you all the time. And they'll make your life a misery because you're fighting with their natural habit. So what is their natural habit? If you can find out what their natural habit is and go with the natural habit, you'll have a much more comfortable experience in development as a bonsai than you would otherwise. And it doesn't matter if they're indigenous or exotic. There really is no difference. So we've got some people here tonight who are with the Victorian Native Bonsai Society, and it's just a curious thing, I think a really curious thing, that we've given ourselves permission to style native trees differently from exotic broadleaf trees. Because we observe our native trees and we create our bonsai to imitate their growth habit, don't we? And so we produce bonsai that look like this. And they're beautiful, and they do reflect the natural growth habit of these trees. But they're just broadleaf trees. The other reason why we give ourselves permission to take this approach is because the Japanese don't have access to this mineral and they haven't styled them. And therefore we don't have apparently Japanese rules, even though we wouldn't look at the pictures of them if they did style them, because that's what we're not doing anyway. But they don't have Japanese rules for styling Australian native material. And so we decided to be unique and unusual and different to those rules and just doing something that reflects nature.
Why wouldn't we do this with a Chinese elm or some other exotic broadleaf tree and follow the same approach? Because broadleaf trees, regardless of their origin, grow the same way in the natural world everywhere. Fan-branched architecture, low arched canopy, multiple vertical elements. That's what a tree looks like.
Steve, many years ago when Hero first came out, and he said to us then at the Big Society, why are you doing maples, pines? Why aren't you doing your Australian natives? And how long ago was that Hero came out? Quentin?
Well, the last time it came out was probably nearly 10 years ago now.
And when he first came out, that's what he said. Yep.
Nearly
Why are we
20 years ago.
But we are now, and we're making beautiful bonsai elephants.
They're beautiful.
It's great. So, I have this conversation with a lot of people, and I just sort of play some of it out here tonight. The conversation goes as something like, I don't know what to do with this such and such a tree. Oh, okay. So why not start by working on the core of the tree? And the core of the tree, I mean, is the trunk and the principal exit points of the primary branches. You know, it's the bit in the heart of the tree. Start with the core of the tree so that it looks more like a tree in its natural environment. And I get this blank look on people's face. What? Quiet, silence. I don't know what he means. To make it look like a big old tree. More silence. I still don't know what he means. What does a such and such look like? I mean, how do I do that? It's like they're asking, what does a tree look like? Because I don't think people really look at trees. And so, well, a good place to start would be to go out and look at trees. When you can tell me what you want it to look like, I can help you get there. But if you don't know what it's going to look like, I'll style it to what I would like it to look like. But you have to know. Don't style a tree by default. Know what you want. Ask for help how to get there. Choose your aesthetic. Don't act by default. I think I said that again, didn't I? Oh, did I say don't act by default?
You did.
Here's a broadleaf tree in the natural world. It's made up of many upward vertical I don't mean exactly perpendicular, but upward placing elements. Not a single trunk line. It's very unusual for broadleaf trees to have a single trunk. They're growing in a forest environment where they're very tightly grown together and there's not much airspace and they want to race up to get their share of the sky and beat everybody else up there, absolutely. When they're young and they're not at their mature height, absolutely. If they're out in the open, they've got plenty of space, they're only competing with themselves, they want to take up the space, they've got multiple elements. And so multiple vertical elements, and then look at the lateral elements. So there are multiple elements that go up through the centre of the tree. There are lateral elements that create branches, and the branch structures tend to go out, fan branching again. The lower branches are down, the tips of those branches are up, so they're not flat, they're curved and straight and they point up. You come up to the top of the tree, and the top of the tree is made up by many, many elements that go up from 45 degrees up to the top of the tree. And they start lower down the tree, down here. And that canopy is formed by numerous small elements that go up from 45 degrees to directly vertical. This is what broadleaf trees do. So if you don't know what trees look like, go out and have a look. You'll find them doing this all the time. Now this is in England, so it's some sort of English tree. It's not a eucalypt. But if you look at eucalypts, they do the same thing. Eucalypts grow this way. They do exactly that. The laws of physics are not different in Australia to anywhere else. And timber behaves just like timber, no matter what sort of tree it comes from. It has certain strength, it's got certain tension capabilities, it can reach so far, it's always the same. If you see a dead eucalypt tree, you wouldn't know what sort of a tree it was if you couldn't see its leaves. It could be an exotic tree, it could be a eucalypt, it could be anything. Don't draw a distinction between Australian natives being different from any other sort of broadleaf tree. We talk about, is there an Australian style? We're talking about that today. Is there an Australian style? And should there be an Australian style? Well, I'm sorry, I just see commons and broadleaf trees. So if Australian natives are broadleaf trees, style them like broadleaf trees. They could be European broadleaf trees, they could be American broadleaf trees, they could be Australian broadleaf trees. No difference. They could be Australian conifers, calyptrus. Style them like a conifer. Dominant single trunk, absolutely. Triangular profile, absolutely. Make them look like in the real world. Here's a beautiful old eucalypt. Look at that. Would you love to put that in a pot? Look at the trunk structure, look at the physical structure of the branches that go up to reach the top of the tree. And remember that old Japanese maple? Not so much difference, is there really, in the trunk structural elements of those trees. Look at the way they twist and bend and turn, finding their way and struggling to the top. You can imagine one being the model for the other. Here's a classic case. It's a eucalypt. It's no different from the way in which a maple grows. So stylish trees, if they're broadleaf trees, like broadleaf trees. Subject to the aesthetic you might choose for what they look like when they're styled. This is just a classic model again. I just want to show you this picture again, because it re-emphasises that question of the divided trunk line, so that you don't have a dominant single trunk going all the way to the very top of the tree. And this is just a very bad photograph of a tree without leaves, because it emphasises again some of these messages. The first one is the fan-branched architecture, really easy, clear to see. And the second one is the compound nature of the branches and how far they spread vertically, as well as horizontally and laterally. And if you build all of these things in, with sufficient branch density in your trees, you'll end up with a beautiful broadleaf tree. And this is the one that we looked at before. Now, with all that explanation we've been through, you look at the structure of it and work out how we can replicate that in the trees we grow, in the trees that we're building. And here are some trees that you'll recognise. So this was the convention that you held in 2018. Absolutely stunning trees there. Absolutely stunning trees. So what marks out these trees? I think what marks these trees out for me is the compound nature of the branching. The number of branching and the complexity of the branching that they have. The construction of the apex of the trees. And the level of ramification that they've been able to
If you superimpose several trees on top of one another, you find that the branches, or the trunks,
Yeah.
the branches come out almost identical. Nature does that.
Here's a couple more. Now, the beach on the right very clearly follows very much the Japanese model. It is classical Japanese training for a beach. But it's sufficiently so that it still carries some of those elements that we're talking about in terms of the compounding of the branches and the fan branched architecture and the upward construction of the apex of the tree. I think the apex of the tree is the thing that most people struggle with when they're finishing a bonsai. How do you actually build the apex of a tree so that it is pragmatic, so that it's realistic, so that it can carry the story? And people have trouble with it because they're trying to build an apex out of horizontal branch construction rather than vertical branch construction. But it's something that you need to look at the bonsai like this that you see in the real world at shows that you visit, the high quality ones, the pictures you can see online of Japanese bonsai, and focus on the construction methodology that they use for building the architecture around the apex of the tree, because that's one of the most convincing elements of a bonsai, is how the apex is completed, because it's the thing that you can carry the illusion, of an aged tree miniature. It's interesting that we talk about the differences between conifers and broadleaf trees, but even with a conifer, I mean, if you see some really, really old pine trees, I've got one on my property, it's massive old radiata thing, but it gets to the top, and actually at the very top of the tree it develops the same fan-branched architecture. It's got, the trunk is divided, there are many elements that go up, but only at the very top of the tree. But even a really, really old pine tree will do it. A couple more. So same message, isn't it? And the dominant message is the compound nature of the branch structure, not flat branches. The flat branches is reflective of the default option based on formal black pine architecture. It's the application of the wrong model to the wrong type of tree. And the Japanese don't do that. The Japanese do this. If you follow the Japanese principle, this is what we need to do with our tree. Compound branch structure versus the default structure. Now, once again, it's your choice. So if you really like that default structure, if you really like it, you think it creates something that is sort of kind of really beautiful, well, it's your choice to do that. That's fine. You'll get pleasure out of doing it. That's fine. But if you're doing it that way because you haven't considered the alternative, then all I can say is please consider the alternative. Because if you find some appeal in creating some bonsai that have a greater reflection of what trees would be doing in the real world, then it is worthwhile considering that alternative and understanding how you can perhaps transform a flat-branched architecture tree into one that has compound branches. And it is achievable and it can be done. So, Western Universal versus Eastern Broadleaf. Trees that look like bonsai versus bonsai that look like trees. Is it all making sense? Is it all hanging together? Okay, it's good. It's not the sort of stuff you've ever talked about before. No. So it's good to have that conversation. It's great. I love doing these talks with folks because people go away and they say to me later, I've now got to go home and destroy all of my bonsai and start again. You're so mean, you're a nasty man. Why did you come?
Steve, if we've got those sort of trees, which a lot of us have, we got one.
Yeah.
But how do we get it like that? Throw them out and start again.
Well, see, that's the trouble. That people go away from these meetings that I had with that sort of sentiment.
Exactly
The answer
right.
is no,
How
it's
do we
not.
get it like that?
It's not, because you can disrupt. And I have run a number of disruption workshops where people convinced of the idea that they need to do something different. And the lights have gone and they said, oh, you've made me hate all of my bonsais.
Yes.
And so I said, well, let's run a disruption workshop. So bring your trees along and we'll disrupt them. So what we do is where you've got these flat branches, you take one part up, the other part down, and slip them under here. And then you do that again with these pieces as well. Some bits go to the side, some goes up, some go down, put some movement in them. All of a sudden you've got compound branches. Really, it's really easy to do. bit of wire. That's why we use wire for bonsai. Yeah? So you can disrupt the flat, get some movement in them, ups and downs, make them much more realistic. So it's easy to do. The other thing that disrupting flat branches does is that it comes back to the question of branch density, because many of our trees don't have enough branches. So if we've got a bonsai that's got 6, 8 or 10 branches, and they're flat branches, we will have these spaces through the trees, won't we? Big spaces through them. But of course the other old hoary old point that people say is, oh, you've got to have room for the birds to fly through. Have you heard that? And my comment to that question is, well, how big are these bloody birds?
Yes.
Because if I've got a tree this big and it's supposed to be replicating a full-size tree, well, the birds are going to be bloody tiny.
That's right.
I don't want the bagpipe from the backyard flying through my bonsai. Okay, so think again about those Japanese trees without me flicking back to the pictures. Can you see where the birds fly through them?
Yeah.
Absolutely, no way. No. But if you want to create some spaces, because spaces are also evidence of aging, they're one of the characteristics, part of the aesthetic of age, so yeah, spaces are not so bad. We don't want to go gaping gaps. We don't want to be able to go and put sheets of paper on our pages, on our branches. So some parts will go up, some parts will go down, there will still be some gaps, but we'll build a more consistent, complete canopy of the tree. It can be done. Western Universal versus Eastern Broadleaf. It's for us to choose. But you don't have to change the trees to satisfy some guy that comes along from Brisbane and tells you stuff and he's gone tomorrow. You really don't. Just work it out yourself. Do what you want to do. Our goal is to simulate an aged tree in miniature. And remember the 4 planks of the aesthetic. Authenticity. Is it a conifer or is it a broadleaf? Do something that's authentic. How does that tree grow in nature? Can I replicate that? Authenticity. How can I bring age into it? Harmony and balance and proportion and depth and perspective. Relative size of components. And then the balance question about posture. In summary, choose your aesthetic. Work out what you want your bonsai to look like. Be careful of adopting the default Western Universal style. Be able to answer the question, what was the idea behind creating the shape of your bonsai? I might come to you and say, this is your tree. Well, why did you make it look like this? Can you explain that question? Can you answer that question? Why is it that shape? The answer cannot be, please, because that's what they told me I had to do. And for a more comfortable journey, work the tree's natural growth habit. Consider the values of authentic, naturally inspired styling. If in doubt, just make your bonsai look like a tree. Thank you, everybody.
Questions?
Yeah.
Questions, yeah. Ready for that.
Any questions?
I've got a question. Now,
I'm a bit deaf.
we do gins in junipers.
With, sorry?
With junipers, we do gins. Now, I've gone walking and seen a eucalyptus with the whole branch dead,
Yeah.
which looks like a gin,
Mhm.
but we're not allowed to do that in bonsai. They say it can only be on junipers, not on broadleaf trees, or because you don't have gins on broadleaf trees.
Well, but then what you need to do is you say, oh, look, I'm building an Australian tree, so I'm working on Australian style. And in the Australian vernacular, we have a lot of dead wood in our trees.
Like, I never noticed trees until I started bonsai, and then I can look at a tree and go, that's a beautiful tree.
Yeah?
Humongous, like, 20, 30 foot tree, it's just beautiful,
Yeah.
pictured in a bonsai.
Ooh.
But it had a dead branch, but you
Yeah.
can't do that,
Yeah. Well,
supposedly.
well,
Well, now you've got permission
Now I've
to.
got permission to do it.
I've given you permission. That's right, exactly.
If anyone wants to see a beautiful big ficus in Hyde Street, opposite the Yarraville Tennis Club, near the Yarraville Gardens, it is absolutely beautiful, as you've got here.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's old, older than me, and I'm
Yeah.
and it's just
She's
a
105.
beautiful, a beautiful tree.
That's right, and Barry will excuse me because I know Barry's got this absolutely gorgeous little ficus. It's a beautiful little tree, isn't it? It's a single trunk tree. It's got fairly horizontal sort of branching, but at the apex of it, at the top part of the tree, 1/3 of the top of the tree, the branches do start to incline upwards. So you're starting to build that apex as you would with a tree of this structure. Now, it's not naturalistic ficus style, is it? That we were just talking about. It's not that at all.
That's not, no.
It's based on the old rules of bonsai, the dominant single trunk and branches that go left, da 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 da. But it doesn't make it any less beautiful, and you don't admire it any the less for it. And the elements of its construction are very nice. One of the things that enables this style of tree to get away with it and to look as beautiful as it does, even though it is contrary to the tree's natural habit, is that it's got lots of branches. It's got high branch density. This tree with only 6 branches wouldn't be worth looking at because it's got a lot of branches it can get away with it. And it's a lovely little tree. Now, if you had the chance, would you interrupt this tree and try and convert it back into a classic fig bonsai? Of course not. No. It's beautiful the way it is. But if you were starting with a new piece of material and you had this new consciousness and awareness and a desire to do something with a different aesthetic where you reflected the natural habit, that's when you might begin to do something new. I mean, this little ficus is very similar. Different tree, different style. You know, I mean, undeniable characteristics of age. Look at that trunk. Absolutely stunningly beautiful. Dominant single trunk that goes all the way to the very top. Now, it's a very old tree, it's been growing for a long time. Problems occur eventually in how you're maintaining this in a long period of time and what you do and what goes on the top of the tree, because the top of the tree tends to get out of control, and if you ever let this top of the tree get out of control and you have a broad expanse of leaves at the top of the tree, you'll end up with one of those bottleheads. You'll end up with the top of the tree thickening and you'll blow out the proportion and the appeal of the tree will be lost. But whatever you can keep it under control, you can manage it in that way, it'll always be an absolutely stunning, gorgeous little tree. And it achieves all the things that we would like to do within the definition of that aesthetic, apart from that issue of authenticity. But I think we can excuse that in this regard. So a lovely little tree. Any other questions? Is there anybody here who would like to volunteer their tree for a discussion? No, not now.
Tony is.
Yeah, which is yours, Tony?
Peter.
One on the end here? Can I bring it across?
That's
To the
Peter.
table?
Oh, Peter, yeah.
I'll let you do it.
Yeah, that's who I meant. I meant Peter. I think this is that chip around.
Chinese elm? Chinese elm? Yeah. Beautiful Chinese elm. Where is it on the spectrum? I'm not going to tell you, you tell me. Is it towards the left-hand end or is it towards the right-hand end? All those in favour of the right-hand end, put your hands up.
Isn't the right hand end that
The
way?
right-hand end of the spectrum that I have here. Remember the
Yeah,
spectrum?
it's towards
Realistic?
the right.
Realistic, so figurative and abstract. Is it towards the
Towards
figurative end?
figurative.
Or is it towards the abstract end? Towards the left-hand side. The left-hand side was down here. So it was more towards that abstract end. It was more towards the Western Universal Standard. So it's classic Western Universal styling for an informal upright tree, isn't it? So if I had 6 sheets of paper, I could come up with this tree and I could put one there, one there, one there, one there, one there, and they would just sit there quite quietly. Now the branches aren't exactly flat.
So there's some
They have some depth, but limited depth, and I think the fact that they have got limited depth helps carry the styling of this tree. I think the number of branches helps carry the styling of the tree. Let's count them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Lots of branches. Really good. Great branch density. Great branch density. It's appealing. It's a pretty tree. Looks gorgeous with its new leaves on it. Structurally, nice movement in the trunk, nice taper, goes all the way to the very top of the tree, as you would expect to see with the Western Universal model. If you'd started 30 years ago with a different branch structure, think about the models of the trees that we had on the screen here a little while ago of trees within your club with compound branching. It would be a different tree if it had compound branching. It would look much more realistic than stylistic. For me, my preference is more towards the right angle of the scale. I think you understand that. So trees like this that are a little bit to the left of the scale are not as appealing to me as those that might otherwise be. Nonetheless, I respect the work that's gone into the tree to create this. I respect the age of the tree because that's apparent as well. And I also respect the inherent appeal that it has. And it does have that. But it's of a different model that necessarily I would perhaps choose to do. Would you see an Australian native being styled in this way? Yeah. Less likely to. Less likely to. And I think that again reflects on the fact that with Australian native material, broadleaf trees, we've given ourselves permission to style them like broadleaves. Whereas when the styling of this tree was started many, many years ago, our artist here on the right-hand side of the room was influenced by that default styling methodology that had been de rigueur at the time, if not now.
I think that could have been our darling Ron Anderson, actually.
Yeah? How long ago was that?
Oh, how long ago was Ron with us? When we first, 1972.
72.
And that was what, well, I joined the club
Yeah.
in early 80s,
Yeah.
but that was the apex up there,
That's right.
directly.
Yeah.
And if you did anything wrong, you get a whack over the fingers. No, you wouldn't. But that was Ron's, and I can see, yes.
And I think, that demonstrates the dilemma that many of us have who are of that older generation who've been doing bonsai for a long time, were influenced by some of those people in the early days. We started styling our trees in the Western Universal Model, and then for myself, I get to a certain point along that journey and I start looking at my trees and I think, what was I thinking? And then you get to the point where you go out to the bonsai garden, you can't stand looking at them any longer and you have to get rid of them. And it comes back to your point that, now I'm going to have to go home and cut some branches off my trees.
Well, this Nell Anderson, Nell Southern, was it Nell Southern? And she was at a show and these people are standing there saying it's all done by electric wires. They're all being tied with, and then they turn the power on and that's why the wires are on. And Nell was a teacher, so you can imagine what she told them. Yeah. But that's exactly how we were taught that way.
That's right. And I think a lot of trees we see today reflect their early years, and some of these early years were decades ago. We can't beat that, and because they were decades ago, disrupting some of the structural style is going to be decades' work, so we're not going to do it.
I still love it, Peter.
It's a beautiful tree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other brave songs? Yeah?
The multi-trunk.
The
Multi-trunk birch.
The multi-trunk, yeah. What is it?
Birch. B-I-R-C-H.
Okay. Beautiful red spring growth.
Always red.
It's always there.
Always
it's
red.
Evergreen, ever red.
Yeah.
Is that right?
No, it's a deciduous tree, it's just a typical bird.
Oh, I see, gotcha. Okay, so it is spring, but they're always that colour. Well, I think I said, through the presentation, that if you've got a tree with only a few branches, then it's good if you have a number of them together because the total branch count adds up. And so if you've got two trees together, this one's got 6 that go out in this way, this one's got 6 that go out in this way. Well, it sort of looks like a tree that's got branches and it's got good coverage 360. So individually, as individual trees, it would never work. But I guess that's the same for any group, isn't it? Because they tend to have fewer branches in closer proximity. So you would expect that. Well, I think it's nice. It's quite naturalistic in the style. It's quite sparsely branched. It's got plenty of characteristics of age in terms of the bark on the lower part of the trees and the old rumples and bumples along the trunk where things have been cut off and there are bits of material that have died and so on.
Looks like a birch tree.
Looks like a birch tree. Yeah, yeah, it does. Many of the branches, even the lower branches in the tree, have an upward inclination. And I think if you wanted to increase the appearance of that ageing and build on the ageing aesthetic, there may be something you could do in terms of some of the lower branches, in that they've all got this common angulation all the way down the tree. Some of the lower branches to bring some of them down a bit. Even if not necessarily horizontal, but even close to horizontal. And to think about if they did come down to bring the tips up. Because remember some of these illustrations of real broadleaf trees, the branches come out and then they go up and out and up, and they all build to that upper canopy. I think the apex of the tree, even though the trunk goes all the way to the top, there is a point of division right now, right at the top of the tree. And there are elements of the tree, of the apex. There's a branch here, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, that as they grow and emerge and divide, will form a nice rounded canopy, which is what we're looking for in a broadleaf tree. This one is a bit different. It hasn't quite done the same thing. It would be nice to develop that. And so I think you could look down the tree to find out where there are some points of division and work out how you can begin to get this upward division and branching. I love it, very nice. Lovely tree. I love the inclination. I love the common movement in those three major elements and the contrary bit of these smaller ones. I think it's very nicely done. Nice piece of work. How long have you had it?
Oh, about 7 years.
7 years, yeah. Yeah. So certainly it doesn't have the branch density that we would see within those Japanese models, but we do see trees that look like this. We do see trees that look like that. They're not all heavily branched. So there are some that are much more sparsely branched and much more slender. And I think the other hoary old problem we have with bonsai is that a bonsai tree must have this height to trunk diameter of ratio of 5 or 6 or 7 or something rather. The ratio is here probably 10 or 15, but that doesn't detract from the visual impression you get when you look at this tree, because you can look at this group and you can see that tree somewhere in nature, because in looking at that tree it can take you off somewhere where you've seen trees like this in the natural world. And if you can look at a bonsai and it can take you on that journey, that imaginative journey, that memory journey, then it's achieving its result. And for me, that tree is really achieving its result. I'm doing the job nicely. Nice, very good. Well done, congratulations. You deserve a chocolate. I think I've got one left. I do, here you go. Here you catch. I think we might have time for one more Brave Salt. Bravery's run out.
Stephen, if you've got a tree that hasn't got many branches on it, besides cutting it in half, what can you do with it?
A tree that hasn't got any branches on it.
Hasn't got many branches on it.
Hasn't got many branches on it. This is the discussion we had just at the workshop the other day. Well, I think I said earlier on, if a tree's got 6 branches, it needs to be 3 times as high. That's one alternative. But that gets really big. The other alternative is just to graft some branches onto it. And don't laugh about that, because that's exactly what the Japanese do. The Japanese use grafting all the time. They use it all the time. So don't be shy about grafting, and don't think it's something that you shouldn't do and it's foreign, it's nasty, it's cheating. It's the way to build a bonsai, because everything we do is artificial. We use wire in our trees. That's a bit cheating too. Anybody who uses wire is cheating. So don't be afraid about grafting. Learn about grafting, because it's really easy, it's really foolproof, and it's really, really efficient. And if you've got a tree that's only got 6 branches and you graft another 3 on, you'll transform that tree beyond recognition. And you can wait forever for it to shoot where you would like a branch, and it'll just frustrate you and frustrate you. It's not going to do it. Yeah, that's the way to go. But don't hesitate to do it. I mean, I've done it on lots of my trees. And the easiest way is the old approach graft, where you take a cutting from the existing tree, get it growing, get it rooted and growing in a small pot. Let it extend till it's vigorous and growing well. Take it over to the tree where you want this branch to be. Cut a small groove in the tree, preferably the back of the trunk where you don't see that wound that'll be there. Make a scratch on the scion, on the trunk of the small tree you want to graft. put it in the groove so that it's fully immersed in the groove, wire it in there, screw it in there, tape it on there, wait 8 weeks, and there's a very good chance it will have incorporated. Wait another 8 weeks, be sure, look for the evidence, look for the junction lines, look to see that the sign where it leaves the tree is now heavier than the part that goes into the tree, cut it off, you've got a branch. There's another technique, and I talk about grafting in my book. Anybody who would like a copy of my book, there's a second plug for the night. But there's another technique which I call hairpin grafting, because when you do an approach graft, the approach graft is on the side of the tree, and it's not exactly in a naturalistic orientation. But if you take the scion and bend it through 180 degrees, so it's like a hairpin, comes along, bends back, make sure it's alive and working well, and when you want to place that tree in the rootstock tree, just drill a hole in the side of the tree, scrape some bark on the scion and plug it in. And then you can plug it in to come out of the tree along the centre line, and so that it looks entirely natural. And then after a couple of years, you would never know that it was a grafted branch.
Did you do that, Barry?
Yes.
Yeah, Barry's done that. He's had the tree. Oh, Mr. Cato's brother, that's what he did when we went to his nursery, and he had branches, you know, going across on a branch like that, like it might have been right from round the back, and he's got it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So that's the other way. You can either use a scion that you've grown from a cutting, or you can let an extended piece of material grow from another part of the tree so it's quite long and flexible, and bend it all the way around and use it. So you don't have to have a little rooted tree, you just use that as the sign as well. But they're very effective techniques. I grow swamp cypresses in Brisbane, and so once again it's that process where things grow and you let them grow, and all of a sudden they're tall, and all of a sudden you use what the tree produced and realise one day that there are not enough branches or there's a gap in the tree. And how do I fill that gap? Well, the only way to really fill the gap is come back and graft the branch in. So I've got swamp cypresses of this small where I've grafted maybe 3 branches in the tree. Just transforms it entirely, because you remove these flaws where there is a huge gap in a piece of trunk line that should have a branch in it that doesn't. You've got a certain branch density below, a certain branch density above, but there's this gap on the branch on the trunk line. Well, just plug one in. Plug one in and it's really easy and the problem's fixed.
Can I ask the person that owns that second one before?
Yeah.
Would you like to comment on that?
Where's Dave? He's down the back there. Can I lift up one of your trees, Dave? English elm? English elm?
Yes.
Yeah. So the normal approach one would take, I think, if we were of the old mindset, in adopting this piece of material and beginning to turn it into bonsai, we would look at this tree and we would identify branches that gave us the opportunity for one of the, we'd identify them at the trunk, where the bar is, and say, okay, well, let's say this is going to be the front of the tree. We'd pick a front of the tree on the basis of where the bar is, what the roots look like, and all that sort of stuff, the curvature. That looks good. Now let's pick some branches. So first off, we're looking for is the first branch. And the first branch is going to be on the lower left or the lower right. So we pick the first branch. It's the lower left. Then we find one that's a certain space up. That's going to be the right branch. And we pick that one. We cut out anything that's in between. Now we need the back branch. So we find the back branch and we cut out anything that's not the back branch. Then we repeat that pattern again. And all of a sudden we've run out of branches. We've done that twice and we've got 6 branches. Oh, not going to make a very good bonsai with 6 branches. And on the bench around us we've got 10 branches we've just cut off. Oh dear, what am I going to do?
Graft them back on.
Quick, put them in some soil and let's get them rooted, and then we can use them as grafts. That's right. So you can see the fallacy of that old approach, in approaching some material like this, versus one where you look at it and say, what am I going to do to keep as many of these branches as I possibly can, because I can't afford to lose them, because it's going to be wonderful in terms of and I can't afford to stick to the old left, right, back in 2 cycles, or else I'm just going to lose so much opportunity.
What are you going to do with it anyway?
I'm not telling you. I've only just looked at it.
Well,
What am I going to do with it? Well, what I would
you've got that
do,
heavy top on it, so...
my first approach would be to find each of those locations where there are more than one branch coming from one location. So I would do the decongestion, I call it decongestion, so I decongest the tree. Many times when you see these things shoot, doesn't matter what they are, you'll get 2 or 3 little shoots, little branches coming from one point. You can't have that, doesn't look right. Trees don't do that in the real world. So I'd have to take 2 of those out and I'd just keep one. So I'd go around the tree, indiscriminately, looking for multiple branches, reducing those points of congestion to 1. Then I'd look at those branches that were in left, and I'd say, what's the relative positions of those branches? Are there sufficient spaces vertically between them? Are there sufficient spaces circumferentially between them? And are there any that I need to remove because there's a conflicting arrangement? Because 2 branches are coming out from the trunk directly above each other in close proximity to each other. Not going to work so well. One of those has got to go. And all the time you're keeping on an eye on how many branches are left and then what you can do with them. And then beyond that, if I instantly wanted to make an instant bonsai, I'd be thinking about what can I do with the lower branches to get them down a little. But I want them to develop and get a little bit stronger, so I'll put the tip up, because if I don't put the tip up, they'll stop growing. Then I come up the tree and I look at the branches that come up the tree, and what do I do with those branches in terms of their shaping, and how do I form an apex? And then with this tree, what do I do with the chop? Do I try to telescope that chop? Do I try to disguise the chop? What do I try to do with it? And so you might look, and is there a little branch that comes up close to that chop, or is there a little branch that's got a vertical alignment that I can change the shape of that chop so that over the next 10 years you go through and grow and cut, grow and cut, grow and cut the apex of the tree to try and reduce the difference in the diameter of the tree at the top of the tree. But that's quite a long process. The other classical process that people use when you use trunk chop trees is don't try and disguise it, but try and make a feature of it. So Ted's just been working on his tried maple here for the last, at the workshop the other day. It was a scraggy old thing that had horizontal branches, but then had been chopped off and had a big scarred top of the tree. So what we've done with this tree instead is there was one branch that did have some upward orientation, so that we wired it into a closer vertical position in the first instance, and we're going to turn the top of the tree, which is now being stripped of its bark and had some holes drilled in it, turn it into a feature. So if you can't disguise it, turn it into a feature, because you see lots of trees in the natural environment that have had their tree, the top of the tree is destroyed or broken and struck by lightning or damaged in a storm, and the tree survives and tries to grow around it. Beautiful hollowed tree here. Classical approach. You could have either tried to telescope that trunk chop many years ago and keep the trunk sound, or you can give it the appearances of age and the attributes of a difficult life by hollowing it out. A little piece of collected material here, another one of Dave's, absolutely beautifully carved. Beautifully carved. Now, all of that has been shaped by the hand of man. And the chop point has been hollowed out to make it look very realistic. And so what was once an ugly transition that you would never really be able to disguise properly by trying to grow around it, turn it into a feature. So that's the approach. That's the approach to take. I've collected the trees myself, where I've done a big concave cut and tried to grow material around it. But you will always see that concave cut. You always recognise a chop tree. It really, really takes many, many years to be able to get successive growth upward to transition that to make it look like a correct profile and a correct taper. So we don't have that long, do we? None of us has that long, so sort of pushes it towards the idea of making it a feature.
You might, but I haven't.
No, I'm with you. But a nice piece of material. But yeah, it's that decongestion process, I think, is the first process for me to get back to single branches in locations and work out how you might take it from there. But even naturally, it's starting to develop, even as a juvenile piece of material, some of that fan branching, with a lot of branches coming up and the other ones are more upwards. So it's helping along the way, suggesting which way it should go. And it's suggesting which way it could go. That says natural habit. Don't fight the natural habit, go with it. All right, I might have exhausted you, you've exhausted me.
Well done. So thank you, Stephen, again. Thank